Hi, my name is Hameed, and today I will be presenting the paper Participatory Design Tools Leveraging Materiality and Familiarity to Adapt Unconventional Materials into Design Tools. I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues, Dr. Stephen Snow and Dr. Ben Matthews. I will be discussing how unconventional materials like the Rubik's Cube can be adapted and used as a design tool to foster participatory and design-early mindsets. This paper is part of a broader research program that explores how to make design-early practices, tools, and methods easier to understand and use by non-designers. Participatory and collaborative design approaches are becoming increasingly popular within industry practice. As the adoption of these practices scales up, it becomes increasingly important for designers to explore how the materiality of the mechanisms of participation, that is, the tools, methods, and practices of design, can be made more accessible to a broader audience. It is important to ensure that non-designers do not simply adopt and use design methods and practices at face value without critically reflecting on the rationale for why they are using these approaches, what can be accomplished through them, and most importantly, what value is being created. Without thoughtful consideration, using these approaches might result in what we characterize as attempted participatory design, where participatory and design-early approaches are used with the best of intentions, but there is little to no actual understanding of their fit for purpose or the value that is being created. Designers who deploy design materials must also critically consider and reflect on how their material decisions have direct consequences to participation. Hence, this paper explores how we might design more accessible, useful, and sustainable participatory design tools that leverage the materiality and familiarity of unconventional off-the-shelf materials. Skilled design practitioners have the capacity to appropriate tools, techniques, and methods to different contexts, while novices and non-designers take time and need experience to develop these skills. Experimenting with familiarity enables us to revisit design materials from a fresh perspective, revealing material possibilities and opportunities for deeper engagement. This facilitates a material dialogue, the back talk between the materials and the users. Revisiting our shared understanding of the methods, practices, and tools allows us to engage more profoundly with the context where the tools are deployed and reflect, evaluate, and critique the value that's created. Experimenting with familiarity can also scaffold participation, as familiar artifacts might reduce some of the barriers to participation, give greater agency, understanding, and control to the participants who can draw on prior experience of using the materials. Materiality also plays a central role in structuring participation, engaging with materials and their properties prior to or in addition to engaging with the social constructs and social context of the materials allows us to more closely appreciate how materials can be used. Changing the application context of a material, removing it from its original intended purpose, facilitates reflexivity and lateral thinking. Close appreciation of the materiality of unconventional materials allows us to adapt them into design tools and inherently discourages the use of cookie cutter, pre-configured, template-based approaches, which might not be suitable for different design contexts. For this paper, we study the Rubik's Cube, a twisty joints puzzle, as our unconventional material. As a puzzle, it has unique material affordances. It twists, turns, rotates. It has its own unique movement notation, meaning that the rotations can be documented and retraced. There's also a perceived level of skill required in solving the puzzle, yet little to no skill required to actually interact with the cube or rotate its faces. The Rubik's Cube acts as an exemplar of an unconventional material, illustrating a spectrum of possibilities of using other similar unconventional materials in addressing the paper's original aims. We conducted 5 design workshops with 11 design practitioners and educators to explore possible applications of using the Rubik's Cube as a tool within design practice. Participants were given 3 different sized cubes in addition to more traditional design materials, including an assortment of design cards, sticky notes, scrap paper, markers, and cutting implements. Participants were asked to explore the materials by experimenting with affordances, movement, and form. The participants were recruited using purposive sampling, where we ensured that they had a formal design education so that they could leverage practical lived experiences of creating and using design methods in both industry and pedagogical contexts. Our findings are organized into 3 themes: material properties, staging considerations, and emergent practices. The material properties refer to the characteristics available inherently within the material. For instance, the Rubik's Cube created a sense of disruption through its novelty, both in terms of its material form, that is the cube itself as an artifact, as well as the context where it was being used. That is, it would stand out if it's used in a workshop setting. Similarly, having the cube available in 3 different sizes added to this novelty, where the uncommon cube sizes took an otherwise recognizable and familiar material and made it novel. Participants were able to experiment with the material affordances as well. For instance, they could write prompts directly onto the boxes of the mega cube, as the area was large enough and the material had a glossy surface, which indicated that dry erase markers might be usable. That said, when P11 started writing onto the cube, they paused and suddenly asked, "It's erasable, right?" Alluding to the fact that the material value was high and they did not want to make a permanent mark on this cube. This material value consideration was more prominently seen later when participants refused to write on the blank design cards provided for ideation. They thought that the research team had put in a lot of effort into their construction, and the card colors corresponded to the cube faces were made of thick cardstock and they had rounded edges. So participants from 4 out of 5 workshops requested to use scrap papers as proxies of the cards instead of writing directly onto them. This again gestured that the material value could be used to both facilitate and inhibit participation. The staging considerations refer to how the design materials are presented to the participants. For instance, participants commented on the importance of how cubes would be presented within an activity. Would they be scrambled or solved? Would there be a preset set of instructions or rules for engagement, or would it be used more as an open-ended material? Emergent practices illustrated the ways in which participants engage with the materials, identifying design application possibilities. For example, in workshop 4, participants had a greater affinity towards using pre-learned color associations to inform prompts. They developed prompts that corresponded to cube sides. For instance, green could be related to money, red could be related to emotion, and so forth, drawing on their prior learned associations. Conversely, however, in workshop 5, participants were very color agnostic. Participants chose not to map their developed prompt categories to any distinct colors. They took whatever random state the mega cube was presented to them in and started writing dimensions directly onto its face, irrespective of the color of the box. Later, participants transferred those prompts onto sticky notes onto the cube, at which point P10 asked, would it be good to have all the feelings, a type of dimension that they had created, on the same colored sticky note? To which P11 replied, I don't know. P10 clarified, so all feelings are green, and P11 responded, nah, with both agreeing not to restrict themselves to the particular colors. Another emergent practice was collaborative rotations. There seemed to be an inherent discomfort in engaging with the cube when it was presented to participants in a solved state. Participants developed multiple strategies when considering how to rotate the cube, such as removing the cube out of sight, placing it under the table, or collaboratively rotating the cube so that the final state of the cube was not created by a single participant. Participants saw this as a means to break the cube, that is, scramble the faces from a solved state to an unsolved one. This highlighted a playful element of interaction of the cube, as well as how important the presentation of the solved and unsolved state was to participation. The findings also led to the creation of 2 examples of participant-generated mechanisms of how a Rubik's Cube might be appropriated as a design tool. These include using the cube as a random input prompt scrambler, as well as a means to develop dynamic persona states. For the purpose of this presentation, I will unpack the random input scrambler. Participants commented on how the Rubik's Cube could be used as a unifying cipher for existing design cards to develop new intersections which may not be in line with how the materials were originally intended to be used. Participants drew parallels to expansion packs of card-based games such as Magic: The Gathering or Cards Against Humanity. This resulted in the creation of the random input scrambler that uses the Rubik's Cube as a cipher, where colors could correspond to a specific design card deck, and in doing so, allow users to engage with multiple types of decks at the same time. For instance, if the orange color represents the envisioning card and the blue color represents the disconnect card, if a face has 2 blue boxes and 1 orange box, as depicted in this image here and more clearly illustrated through the help of the color brick speed cube, the users draw out specific cards from the respective decks to apply in their design activity. This open texture of possibility allows for participants to map various inputs as stimuli, which can help with expanding and exploring a design space. We hope this illustrated example of using materiality and familiarity to adapt the unconventional Rubik's Cube as a design tool can help us expand how we create design tools. Thank you for listening. We encourage you to read the full paper and would be delighted to hear any feedback. Feel free to reach out if you want to continue the conversation with us offline. Thank you.